I just don't have this immediate connection with my child. And does that make me a bad parent? Everything that you're doing in early parenthood is like trying to run a computer on the most processing power it possibly could at any given time, never shutting it down. Like, in your roles and your needs as a couple are going to be so different. What's happening is the lack of communication. How do you communicate that to your partner in a way that honors you and honors them? I think a lot of people expect that their words are a magic bullet for complicated feelings. Children don't have their own regulation systems, they borrow our own. Kids sometimes before the age of 2 do not know the difference between a parent's body and their body. Why early childhood trauma is so hard to articulate. A child is young and they're in an infant toddler stage. All of that behavioral stuff is a manifestation of a lack of language. Parenting has to be a bridge to learning.
People say tantrums are normal, they are developmental, but when you're living through one and when your child cries over the wrong cup, it feels so much personal, and it hits our nervous system, it pokes all old memories, and it drains every ounce of patience that we've had. So today, I am joined by Meghan Watson, who's a psychotherapist and founder of Bloom Psychology and Wellness in Toronto. Hi, Meghan. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm
glad
good
to be here.
I know. Thank you for joining us today. Tell us more about the work that you do.
Yeah, so I'm a registered psychotherapist, and I've been a psychotherapist for about 10 years now. I am a woman of many hats. So I am the founder of Bloom, which we work online across Canada and here in Toronto at our offices in Yorkville. And we're a collective of multiracial therapists that are really focusing on the health and emotional growth of the folks that are in our community and beyond.
Interesting. So when we talk about postpartum, no one really prepares us for what happens to our body, mind, soul.
Mm-hmm.
There's a physical recovery, yes, but also there's internal rewiring that happens where the mom, even a tiny thing, every single thing gets magnified. So what is happening internally, and what kind of changes that you begin to see in couples, especially after they have a baby?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one, right? I think the line I always say is it's a bit of an identity renovation, right? Like the foundation is there, maybe your walls are there, but everything in all of the rooms is different now. And so for moms and new parents and couples, there's, of course, the sleep deprivation, the fogginess, the overwhelm. There's a lot to process when it comes to how you think or not think. You're not thinking as much because it's just a lot of overstimulation. Emotionally, it's a mixed bag, right? Like you might be full of joy and connection, but also feel really guilty or overwhelmed or overstimulated because, you know, you have a lot to think about now, whether it comes to success with breastfeeding or navigating your relationship with new roles as parents. You know, thinking about the role of grandparents and your support network. There's a lot of like relational and cultural systems at play too. So yeah, it's a huge overhaul. And we haven't even touched the body changes, right? Like you just brought a fresh soul into the world, and so your hormones have shifted, you know, your hair, your skin, your organs, everything is changed. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the term chimera. It's a genetic term that happens once you become a parent. Your DNA is permanently fused with that of your child. And so you become a genetic chimera after birth, in which you can no longer ever be disconnected from your child at a genetic level, which I think speaks to the overhaul that happens in postpartum, right? And I'm talking about moms there from the genetic point of view, but there's a lot that happens for dads and others, and, you know, other like caregivers and parents involved in a child's life. It's a big change.
Right. So we spoke about a lot of things. So a couple of them, if I have to re-emphasize, one is the identity crisis. It's like, who am I now? And another is self-doubt. Will I ever be able to take care of another tiny human who will
True.
need me 24/7. So at the same time, for some moms, connection is difficult. But there's always, it's pretty much a cultural thing that, you know, bond has to be instant. There has to be an instant connection between the mom and the baby. Is it okay for the mom to not have this instant connection with the baby?
Oh, yeah. And also, that's not a real thing. It's, I mean, I think for many people, they can feel that like deep bond, a sense of protectiveness. It, you know, I've heard it described as this innate, natural connection, almost instinctual. There's a drive behind it. But I think for other moms, there are also challenges with that connection, right? There's disassociation. I feel disconnected from my body, from myself. And what is this crying thing that needs me? What do I need? Who am I now? And when's the last time I ate? I slept, because we're always thinking about when they have to eat, when they've slept, when, you know, are they getting the enrichment that they need? And I think a lot of that gets degraded for ourselves if we don't have systems or support in place to kind of have that check-in of, okay, so I've met my baby's needs, or I'm attempting to meet my baby's needs, because sometimes they don't know what they need to. And that leads to kind of the stress of trying to figure out, like, what is it that you want? But you need to kind of check in with yourself as well, too. And a lot of that requires resourcing, right? So what energy resources do I have? What time resources? What community resources do I have? So when you don't have a lot of extra support and resourcing, there can be a drift into this disconnected, disassociated state that oftentimes I hear parents feeling really guilty about. Like, I just don't have this immediate connection with my child. And does that make me a bad parent? What does that mean about me? And so that can trigger a lot of old wounds too that were there before you even had a baby.
Right. Yeah. Also, it leads to burnout, like you said, when there's no help and when it's just the mom and dad taking care of the baby. They wait for the newborn phase to end, and then they move to the infant stage thinking that it's going to get better.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't get better. And the sleep is pretty much, it goes for a toss, and your body is on alert mode, always there for the baby when she cries, like, why is she crying? And when you're stretched thin, you pretty much go into the survival mode. And how does exhaustion shape the way parents feel about themselves and about each other?
Yeah, good question. I think when you think about the levels of exhaustion and the challenges that come with early parenthood, whether you're in the newborn stage, the infant stage, or the toddler stage, there are the joys that come with that, right? There's the cute moments. There's the, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with this kid moments if you have them. And then there's the frustrations and the tell me what you want, which I think is mentally draining. Like that level of thinking on a given day is like expert level CEO strategist, resource heavy mode. And I don't think a lot of parents give themselves enough credit because they're like, I'm supposed to be able to handle all of this. And so I really like to remind and validate that everything that you're doing in early parenthood is like trying to run a computer on the most processing power it possibly could at any given time, never shutting it down. And then also having to like satellite power something else. And that takes a lot of energy. So yeah, you're drained. You're drained. And that burnout is valid. I think the ways in which you might make sense of the exhaustion is that validation and that compassion, right? To really think about, what is my nervous system doing? You know, am I tired because I'm just constantly, you know, emotionally on a roller coaster with my kid, like when she's upset or when he's upset, like I'm upset. When they're happy, I'm happy. And so you're kind of on this up, down, like that's tiring too. Is it just the actual sleep deprivation of the newborn stage, of the toddler stage, of the infant stage? I mean, I think it's a myth to think that the toddler and the infant stages sleep gets better. There's oftentimes there's an evolution. There's definitely changes for sure, but it just meets you at that stage, right? And so that exhaustion at a physical level can be so varied in where it's coming from. And I think sometimes just like the pause to really assess, if you have the capacity even to assess, right? Many of us in that phase, I can say for myself, like when I had my son, I don't even remember the first year. Like if someone asked me what happened in 2022 to 2023, I would look back at my pictures and my carousel. I could not bring you a memory of that time. And I think that was most accurately reflected when I thought about my birthday. My birthday is 2 weeks after my son was born. I don't even remember what I did. I know that I was there. I know from the photos that we had a cake and there was like celebration. But when I look back at those photos, I can see in my eyes that I am so tired. I'm a zombie. And I didn't even have the resources or the energy to save those memories. And that is the level of exhaustion that I think parents are really dealing with. And so there needs to be a heaping ton of grace and a little bit of space to kind of just like adjust to that.
Right. New parents they lose 700 hours of sleep in the first year is where I just read.
Oh my God. Is that true?
And also, like, when we talk about when the baby is in around 4 to 6 months is when we say it's a toddler phase, right? Like we discussed, there's a lot of stress. There's no sleep. And there are times where parents end up bickering or they snap at each other. And how does this, though babies at that point, they do not speak, but do they absorb our energy? Does it impact them?
Oh, absolutely.
They do?
Absolutely. But it's not as deep as I think some parents take it, because there are some parents who are so self-critical of trying to be a good parent that they forget that being a good parent can sometimes not be the right parent that your child needs, because sometimes your definition of what good is based on a belief system that is flawed. It's based on perfectionism. It's based on, cultural, ancestral wounds, right? Trauma. And when we see our kids acting out, or, you have a child that's in the toddler phase and is really emotional and feeling all of the feels, that's where I am now. My son is 3 and change. It can be hard to regulate ourselves in the face of it. And so I think when you really, really put it in perspective, you and your partner have a lot of diverse origins. I think any couple would go through the challenges of early parenthood. And that means fights, that means conflict, that means navigating role dynamics, who does what and where. And, I think some of the things that I see a lot are, especially in heterosexual couples, the role dynamics are strained, right? You're not doing it right. I should do it for you. Or, no, let me handle that. Like you give that task, but then you still want to hold on to it. So there's a lot of control themes here. And then there's the pushing back, like the resentment, the resistance. How much time do you have for yourself? Do you feel like yourself? Do you want to have sex? Are you intimate, like emotionally, mentally, physically? Are you connected? These are all major strains, I think, for any relationship at that stage of parenthood, for sure, and beyond. I think it's not just limited to the infant and the toddler stage.
Right. So talking about the relationship again, that's one of the hardest phases that two people who are just checking in with each other, now the entire conversation is around the baby. So, and more so, who's going to change the soil diaper or who's going to put the baby to sleep. Or if the baby just wakes up crying in the night, who's going to rock the baby back to sleep. And both the parents are tired.
Yep.
So, and one parent, for example, the mom, she's just taking care of the baby from morning to evening and she just waits for the husband to come back such that she can just hand. I've seen a lot of reels about the mom standing with the baby at the door around 5 p.m. The minute the husband walks in, she just gives the baby to him.
Yeah.
While the husband is also equally exhausted from work.
Yep.
And there's no space. He's done with 9 to 5. And then 5 to again 12.
Yep.
Daddy duty starts.
Yep.
So it goes on. He takes up the daddy duties and the routine goes on for a while until there's a breaking point wherein the partner feels that does not know how to release it.
Yeah.
So in that moment, so what is happening? They end up snapping or they release it in such a way that it comes out as anger or they just shut down. So how can a partner, what is happening internally and how can they remind themselves to calm down and how can partner be helpful during that phase?
I think there are a ton of helpful things that you can do when you notice your partner is at their breaking point, regardless of their gender, and what your needs are, right? Like in your roles and your needs as a couple are going to be so different, dependent on family to family, right? And so knowing what your roles are vital. And then also having the wherewithal to take a minute to communicate about what those roles are is so important, because what's really happening when the handoff happens at 5 p.m. like that, I think that's just kind of, silly, also a silly thing. I don't actually know that I have physically seen anybody I know like wait at the door and then like hand the baby off like that. But it does kind of happen where the parent comes home and it's like, okay, I've been with the kids all day, like your turn, right? Like I need a moment. And, that other partner, whoever they are, is a little defeated, a little like, where is my time? And that builds up to your point. What's happening is a lack of communication, right? Because those feelings need to be named. It's a negotiation, right? So if you're asked to step in, how are you communicating what you need to do before the handover takes place, right? Like, oh, good. Okay, I'm home. Could I take a minute to run to the bathroom? Could I grab a glass of water and maybe just set my things down before I jump right in? How does that seem to you? Do you want to do the handover before dinner or after dinner? What would make sense for us to kind of navigate the evening? Now that requires a little bit of self-awareness, right? Like, what is it that I need to do instead of just, okay, yeah, like they told me I need to do this, now I'm doing it, and then I'm doing it, and then I'm doing it, and then I'm doing it. And then you get to your breaking point where a little bit of self-awareness bubbles to the surface, and you're like, I can't do it anymore. And then the anger or the resentment. But a lot of that is internally driven because we haven't honored our own needs. We haven't communicated. We haven't spent the time to balance out what that role dynamic looks like with our partners. And truthfully, I think a lot of that is most importantly done before the baby comes. That's kind of the negotiations that happen. I think we're so excited to have the baby in our lives that we forget that the people who need to care for the babies need to create infrastructure and systems of what is going to happen when we are tired and we can't communicate. When I feel this way, how do you assess that if I don't have the language to be able to say, I'm really sad today because a lot happened when you were at work, or I had a really terrible day at work and I just don't know how to process it. And now I feel like I'm failing every time I'm with my kid in the evening because they're also emotional and need things. And don't know what's going on at work for me? How do you communicate that to your partner in a way that honors you and honors them? So, long story long, if you want to be helpful in that dynamic, it's most important to be aware and to be insightful about what you're feeling and to practice your communication skills so that you can verbalize it. And then if you or your partner is struggling with that, to kind of seek support to figure out what are the roles that we play, what are the scripts and the patterns and the ways that we need for our family, not what other people say for us, but for our family, what works for us, and how will we make that system work? That is vital. And a lot of that happens in couples therapy. A lot of that happens in individual therapy. But, it is a negotiation, but it's 100% a comms issue. And it's a awareness issue. But like I said, you're running on E, right? And so there's not a lot of resourcing for gentle self-reflection. I think you kind of work with what you have and pace it. So there's a lot of compassion you can have for each other in those moments too.
Right. So like we discussed, like prior to the baby, the entire conversation is about how we're going to bring the baby out.
Mm-hmm.
And also another valid point, which you brought up is partners end up feeling that at work, they are not able to, they think when they're at work, they think about the home, they're not being a good parent. And when they are at home, they keep thinking about work. And like you said, it's about they're just failing. It's not they're not able to give full attention on both the places. So how can we reassure them that they are when they are actually doing their best? So how do we reassure them that they are doing their best?
I would say exactly what you are doing. It doesn't. Here's the thing. I think a lot of people expect that their words are a magic bullet for complicated feelings. And as a therapist, I know intimately that that is not true. There are an infinite number of wise and gentle things I can say to make someone feel, you know what, you are doing your best. I can validate them. I can hold space for whatever they're feeling. We can contain some of that discomfort, distract, learn a skill. But unless we release expectation that somehow we're going to say something perfect, that then our partner is going to feel better, whatever better looks like in our eyes, we always make their discomfort, their stress, like a hinge to ours. So what I see in couples is the dynamic of, someone is really stressed at work, they're overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I'm not being a good parent. Like you said, they come home, they feel like they're not being successful there too, depending on the age and stage of the child. That could be super developmentally normal. Or there's a lot of support strains, like, meddling grandparents or overwhelming in-laws, like who knows, right? There's a lot going on. But I see a lot of parents who want to fix things for their partner. Like their partner comes home and talks about those feelings. Maybe they are communicating. Maybe they are insightful. And the other person listening is uncomfortable, so uncomfortable because of their compassion and empathy for their partner, that when they try to soothe and support, they want it to be helpful. They want it to be effective. But they're also hinging the effectiveness on whether or not their partner feels better or their emotions somehow like magically change in the conversation. And when it doesn't, there's a frustration that happens. Like, what do I do? Like, how can I help? And I think the insight is for us as that other person to be able to say, am I trying to support, or am I trying to get rid of uncomfortable feelings so I don't feel uncomfortable, right? And so it's a dynamic that can be really nuanced at times. Are you supporting your partner because you know that you just need to hold space for them, and difficult feelings are just that, difficult feelings. They're not gonna magically disappear because we said something kind and validating. It takes a lot of like time and consistency and communication and support for that to really feel like true. But we need to separate, I think, a little bit from this idea that when we say something, they come home and they're overwhelmed, that's our magic bullet. And if they don't respond in that way, that we failed, that we're not doing it right, that we're the problem. And that stems a lot from like self-awareness of, I might be trying to help them because I'm uncomfortable with the uncomfortable emotions and I need it to go away so that we can be good and that we could be all happy again, as opposed to, I hear that this is uncomfortable. I hear how challenging it has been. I honor that. I validate that this is really difficult. I'm here for you. What can I do? And what would make sense for us to feel balanced today, as opposed to, okay, so now you've got to be good. After we've had this conversation, you've got to be good because we got to like get back to it. And what are we getting back to, right?
Understood. I read an article, or probably the research says that the relationship satisfaction often dips in the first 1 to 3 years after the baby. And it's not because the couples or the parents love each other less. It's more so because the emotional load is pretty much so heavy, it's asymmetric and it's invisible. So also the first year, like you said, it's pretty much a blur. We do not know how things go. Sometimes some days are slow, some days are very fast. And how can couples find time for each other? Because they're so overwhelmed.
It's in the moments, right? I think, thinking about my own relationship, a lot of the times it's like the eye communication, like the glances of like, oh, okay, I see that there's something happening over there. And that's, I think, a bit of a validating emotional moment. Like we don't have to actually speak all the time to feel witnessed, to feel known. A lot of the times it can be as you get to know your child, as you get to know your family, and how, if you have multiple kids, that dynamic between the new baby and like, your kids that you had before, and how that family constellation starts to frame up. You can get a bit more intuitive with observation about what your partner needs. And I'll give a personal example. So I don't have multiple kids, but we have a very needy dog and he has had a lot of trouble adjusting to the attention economy shift from, it's just him and we love him and we pour into him, to being like, who is this loud, irritating human being interrupting my retirement? Which is, I think, my assessment of what he's thinking. He's an elder dog. And I've gotten so frustrated when I see my husband, who has naturally immediately transitioned to being like, I don't care about this anymore. Like I just want to focus on our son. And I'm like, but that's our second son. This is my first. And so I spend a lot more time with our dog, and I communicated how I felt like really sad that his relationship with our dog had changed, and how I felt hurt by that. Like in the moment, like I was like, I'm hurt that you're not connected to our dog, which when I say that out loud is slightly unhinged at times. Like I'm crazy. It feels crazy to say that, but that's how I felt. Like, and I was really emotional at the time, just thinking about the grief of our lives had changed and what had happened. And he took that opportunity, instead of becoming defensive and, saying, well, I'm doing everything I can. Like, why don't you see what I'm doing? And like, why are you picking at me for this like nonsensical thing that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things? And realized that there were maybe other things that I was stressed about. And so he kind of paused and he said, I can respond to that, but is there something else that's bothering you, that's making this feel more real for you? And that is a communication strategy of like, okay, let me acknowledge this thing, but maybe ask about what's underneath. And not in a condescending way or patronizing way, but he really just gave me room to say, okay, what is going on for me today? And maybe I am stressed about other things that's leading me to blame you for not having the right connection with our dog, which wasn't even a real thing, truthfully. I think it was like a figment of my imagination in some ways. But we have to really get clear with ourselves about what are we seeing in our partners? What are we observing? At that point, he saw that there was maybe something more to what that was, and delicately asked by gently saying like, hey, like, okay, I acknowledge that feeling. Like, I'm with you and we can talk about it. And is there something else that's bothering you too?
Right. So that's pretty much tip of the iceberg. And we are living through the situation right now because we also have a dog who's just going to turn 2 years.
Okay, so you relate.
So he's so jealous. So our daughter just turned 6 months. We ended up getting a playpen. He's always been he's pretty much our first child. We ended up getting a playpen. So whenever we put her in the playpen, he gets so jealous. He'll bring his toy either to me or to my husband.
Yep.
So talking about the multiple kids household or even a dog, someone who's got a dog, the first kid, especially when the first kid is a toddler, they get so jealous. They end up saying, no, mama's mine. It takes some time for them to actually acknowledge that attention is, because of course they're going to get divided attention. And parents in that scenario, they find it very difficult. They're like, I'm not able to give full attention to my first kid. Also, I feel guilty that I'm not able to give attention to this kid as much as I was able to give to the first one.
Yeah.
So when they're conflicted, how do you help them navigate this situation?
Good question. I think a lot of it has to do with remembering that children don't have their own regulation systems. They borrow our own. And that's the essence of what we call co-regulation, right? So when they're overwhelmed, when they're distressed, when, there's a bit of jealousy or possessiveness over a toy between siblings, or our own guilt over what we can offer our family because it has now changed again, there's a lot of that stuff there too. And I think having the clarity to acknowledge that there is a little bit of guilt, that there is a lot of feelings, and those are just feelings. Those aren't facts, right? And knowing that we aren't able to meet this perfectionistic ideal or this expectation that we have to do all the things and be all of the things to all of the people. It takes a lot of co-regulating with our kids and remembering that because they don't have solid differentiation, depending on their age, right? Like kids sometimes before the age of 2 do not know the difference between a parent's body and their body. So when they like nibble on your finger, it's like they're nibbling on theirs, right? Like there's no, they think that you and them are the same person. And so when that differentiation happens, that's when you can really experience the loss, the attachment loss, and the crying of like the separation anxiety. And that's a huge developmental stage that is really important for children to go through. They need to feel that so that you can attach to them securely. And I think what we misunderstand about attachment and sibling dynamics and all of that is that somehow everything is supposed to feel good while we're doing it. And in fact, a lot of it feels really bad. Co-regulating when you are overwhelmed doesn't feel good. It's a lot of deep breaths. It's a lot of restraint. It's a lot of understanding what you're feeling, processing it in real time, reflecting that out to your kids, and not judging yourself for having an emotion. I meet many, many parents who are kind of in that phase with their sibling, and they just get frustrated. They yell, they're snapping, and they don't like who they are when they're trying to navigate all of these competing demands and expectations and their own, right? Their own critic and expectation. So there's a lot of challenges to find your own balance. So your own self-care, your own therapy, your own capacity here is going to help you become a more observational parent, a parent that allows your feelings to exist in the room with all of the emotions, whether it's a dog's or the eldest kid and the youngest or the partner and the baby. It really doesn't matter who is in that dynamic. It's really, really important to just have clarity for yourself about, am I letting myself be a whole person so that I can allow this other person be their whole self too?
Right. That's interesting, yeah. And talking about co-regulation, toddler phase can be a struggle because they have big emotions and opinions, boundaries. And the truth is that they're just venting out. They're just impulsive. And they've not developed the skill. They're just trying to feel things without falling apart. And at that moment, we end up reacting more than what the situation demands. And sometimes it just pretty much triggers part of us, part of our childhood, the way that we were disciplined. So though we tell ourselves that we shouldn't be that person, but we end up being that person.
Yeah.
So again, there's a conflict between who we want to be and the person that we actually end up being. And how does whatever we go through in the past or our childhood shape the way we respond to our kids?
Oh, yeah, a lot. I mean, think about the levels of this, right? Before the age of 3, 4, we don't actually have episodic memory in time. More so, your children are coding emotional memories. And so everything that happened in the early phases of our lives are emotionally coded, right? And so that's why early childhood trauma is so hard to articulate, because there's no language then to articulate it, right? Like pre-verbal experiences. Now, our culture, our ancestry, our environments, all of that is not a blank slate when a child comes into the world. There are narratives, beliefs, expectations, ideas that are placed on ourselves and our children and our families, regardless of how we, might want them to be. They're there. We've got to acknowledge them. And I think it's important to reconnect with the idea that what happened to you is not your only story. And the impact that your childhood can have is in some ways mediated by your resources and your capacity in the moment. It's so hard to generalize here, because I think everybody's culture is so different. Like, how does that impact us? I think it's so hard to nail it down into one thing, because it depends on the culture. Right. It depends on the environment. It depends on the family. A lot of it can feel counterintuitive. So why do I feel guilt when I'm trying to show up for my family, when all of my family, my entire life, has only ever given and been so generous and caring to me, right? That is a counterintuitive mental response from us. And when we are presented with a little bit of that difference, we oftentimes get quite stuck there and overwhelmed, and it's really a place of pain for a lot of parents to kind of navigate that. And I think when you're dealing with toddlers, you don't always have the capacity to slow down because they're moving fast, and it's a challenge to navigate your own influences while also trying to navigate the influence you're exerting over your kids. I don't know, that's so broad. I think I'm finding it hard to answer this question. I think it's so broad from a cultural standpoint to say how one individual culture, one individual person might impact the child rearing or our own experiences. But I'll say I think my response to that is yes, it does influence it.
To a certain extent, yeah.
I think for me as a therapist,
right.
It's hard to it's hard to
Generalize.
generalize that because I think when I generalize in that way, it doesn't always resonate to the truest form, like the kernel of wisdom that really needs to happen in understanding your cultural influence is knowing what those influences are and being curious about those influences, so that if you are confronted with a difference, that you at least have a starting awareness or starting space to think about, okay, this is how I was parented, this is how I was raised, this is how my environment is, how did that impact me, and ultimately, does that have any bearing on where I am as a parent today? That's a whole other layer of processing, a whole other cultural environment. I'm an immigrant. I came here as an adult. So my family does not have an immigration story, but I have an immigration story.
Right.
Like, I'm not a first gen or second gen. I am an immigrant. I don't have I'm not a citizen of this country. And so in many ways, my story and the story of how I got to run my own business and even be sitting here talking to you is one that is not relatable to my son, right? He was born here.
Yeah.
He
yeah.
experienced another world. And so
Right.
I think it again, like, and you can hear this and you'd be like, yeah, there's maybe elements of that are related, but that's a different cultural environment altogether.
Right.
So it really just takes a little bit of personal reflection to consider, well, what is my influence? And how does that transform now into being a parent? Because sometimes being a child is not the same thing as being a parent with the same influences.
Right. So it's more individualistic. Yeah. Makes sense. So building on that, a lot of parents associate discipline to punishment, especially when the kid is very difficult to handle. For example, a mom says that a 1-year-old is biting and throwing things. So the last resort is just to punish the kid, to just ask the kid to go stand by the wall. So how do we discipline kids? Not using punishment as a tool.
I think it's important to consider the types of discipline that you want to consciously engage, and to remember what's happening in the child's brain when they are acting out. When a child is biting, when they're, dysregulated, yelling. I think when they get to the stage that my son is at, where they can talk and they can be mean, and you're like, whoa, like that was rough. Like, did you mean to say that to me? Like, my goodness, that hurt mommy's feelings, right? Like those pieces are difficult to deal with, and so when you are feeling a little bit of that, like, you know what, I'm about to tell you what's up. I'm about to discipline you. It's important to pause there and try and think about consciously, am I disciplining my child because I have something to teach and I have something consciously that I'm giving them to learn about how to be someone that maybe acts a little differently, says something a little more kind, or reflects their feeling without saying something tough, or doesn't harm their sibling or cousin or what have you. You have to think about, what is it that you are teaching them? Because when a child is young and they're in an infant toddler stage, all of that behavioral stuff is a manifestation of a lack of language. Cognitively, developmentally, they don't even have a nervous system. They're borrowing ours. So when we are disciplining them and then we yell and we get unpredictable and they get shocked and scared, and then we're like, oh, well, now you're upset. There's this dynamic that can sometimes happen when punishment occurs. It's like a snowball. And if they're not responding to the punishment in the way that you want, then there's a frustration and a deeper punishment. And think about what they're learning, because discipline for young kids is learning. They don't have any of the base knowledge of how to be. So we can't operate with them like they're adults. And we have to understand that they're absorbing what? Okay, I acted out because I don't have the words to describe what I'm feeling. I don't have the emotional regulation capacity. I don't have the feeling words. I don't have the ways of expressing myself in a way. And instead of my parent teaching me how that is, taking their own moment to say like, wow, that really hurt my feelings, that bruised my ego, that, that's not what I want my child to do, and has now punished me for it by making me stand in a corner, stare at a wall, yells at me, tells me all of these things and these words and these ideas of, don't you know that this isn't this? They don't. They don't know. You just teaching them that when I act out, that unpredictable things happen and I get scared. And they're not learning anything in that environment. In fact, the best thing to do is to, again, slow down and think consciously about, is my discipline manifesting as a learning opportunity for this child? And even though you may have said it 1,000,000 times, they need repetition. You could tell a toddler something 150 times and it feels like they're still not getting it. And then one day they just get it. They just do it. And I think those examples of your constant regulating, co-regulating, taking a deep breath, swallowing that instinct, and then doing the learning moment, saying the feeling word, expressing for them, saying like, it sounds like you're really upset at me, right? I'm also very upset because you said something mean or you hurt me. I don't like that. Do you like it when this happens? To do that requires a lot of like breathing and grounding, which is why I said like the conscious parenting has to be a bridge to learning, because at the end of the day, 2 different punishment styles, you have to think, what does one child learn when they're slapped, hit, and made to stand in a corner? And then what does another child learn when you get down to their level and you say like, this is not the behavior that I want for us. This upsets me. I can see that you're upset. I'm focusing on honesty. I'm focusing on learning, and I'm focusing on my own regulation rather than trying to exert power over a child that does not have the mental, emotional, or physical capacity to even comprehend what that is.
Right. So it's all about our response to the kids. It's going to take hours of patience for us to explain again. So it's the way we respond to the kids makes a huge difference.
And we're not perfect. So there's not a demand for perfection, right? Like as a therapist, I don't respond perfectly to my kid every single time. Like there are times where I'm like, wow, the ancestral urge to yell is so loud right now. And even just narrating that for myself is helpful to be like, if I did that when I was a kid, I would have been really in trouble. And to me, I think a lot of the times it's like, what's good for me is good for you happens in parenting, but we don't remember like, did you like that as a kid? Was that helpful for your learning? How has that shaped your ability to interact and be in relationships with people? How has that helped your work relationships? How has that helped your ability to connect meaningfully with friends in conflict? How has that child rearing that you had impacted your capacity to trust your partner? And then now, how is it impacting your blind faith in, I experienced this, so you must now experience it too, as opposed to like, I didn't even like that parenting. What is it that I want? How do I want to parent? And that really frustrates a lot of parents, because then they're like, well, if I can't use the building blocks that were given to me, what blocks am I using? I'm stuck. And then that's where learning for us can happen, right? Like we can engage in books, we can engage in therapy, we can do a little bit of that practice. So it's just honoring that.
Yeah, I read somewhere where millennials are consciously trying to reparent, to just remove themselves from the situation or whatever they've gone through in the past, and to teach them and to let the kid explore the way they want them to be.
Can you imagine how tiring that is?
Yeah, it is.
To do all of that, like emotional, mental reparenting work, and also be like a parent to a toddler and maybe an infant, and then also be at work and having to do things at work. Think about how exhausting that is. There's research that's coming out that having one child in 2025 is like having 3 kids in 1970.
I agree.
And having 2 kids in like 1970 is like having 6 kids. Like 2 kids in 2025 is like having 6 kids. So think about the level of energy that you're putting into parenting that we might never have gotten. I don't think if I asked my mom, like, did you think about like the ancestral wounds and maybe the ways in which you want to parent? Like, she would look at me like I'd grown another head. Like, what are you talking about? I was trying to survive. And so in some ways it's a gift to have the choice and the decision to have more resourcing and energy, because as people of color, we know that like many of us have evolved out of subjugation, oppression, trauma, generational violence, asylum, migration. And when you are parenting and giving birth and trying to be a human being during all of that, your body needs to focus on survival. And so when we grow up in the environments of survival, but we no longer need to survive, we have to really contend with what is important to carry through and what is important to leave behind.
That's right. It's very fair. Yeah. Also, back in the day when we were growing up, we didn't have a lot of exposure. Like, I got my first cell phone when I was 22, 23.
We could do a whole podcast just on the digital era and parenting
So
alone.
that pretty much takes me to the next topic, where when we talk about screen time for kids, it's pretty much a polarizing topic, because a lot of parents feel that a lot of shows like Miss Rachel, they're very helpful because it helps with the kids' linguistic or language development.
Yes.
At the same time, a lot of research says that, which is not good. Like, you shouldn't expose your kids to screen time until they're 2. And some parents religiously, they follow. So what's your take on that?
Like my personal take or my professional take?
Your personal take.
Okay, my personal take. I am more loose than my husband is. He is the screen time vigilante. And he is the one that's like, your cell phone is too close to the child. Like, you know? And in my mind, I'm like, he's going to have to figure out that phones exist, right? Like, so I think we find a balance. Like, he's like all the way on one level, and I'm like, okay, this is like, can we come a little bit more to the realism of our lives? Like, versus like, you read a study and therefore we must adopt that mentality in full without adapting or adjusting it to our own patterns and use. But we are definitely personally less screen time people. It's been much harder to parent that way. Like, I can say from personal experience, it is much harder to parent because you have to play with your kid and do all of the things. You cannot offload to the TV or to entertainment. And I think we made that decision very early on because of that research and because of what we know about the developing brain. But we found other ways to find breaks, because that's what screen time really is. Like, screen time is a medium for support. When you need to get food on the table and your child will not release your leg and you're just like walking around with like a dead weight, like literally like he's clinging to me, then I need you to do something so that I can
Relax.
put your plate together and sit down and we can eat a meal. Otherwise, we'll be here all night. Like, I know you want me to do this thing and play this puzzle and read you this book, but mommy hasn't gone to the bathroom in a few hours, so I just need a minute, right? Like, there are some things that naturally happen in our lives that require space, and our own personhood is also very important, right? We've talked about that even today. So I don't ever blame parents for using screen time as a way to take space and to resource themselves, especially if they're being thoughtful about what that screen time is, right? So we know that less flashing lights. We want to keep the screen. I'm not quite sure the official term for this, but if the images are constantly moving, so Cocomelon, Paw Patrol, these kind of 3-dimensional like orb characters. I don't know if you've seen that. It feels so, it's not the cartoons of our day. Like, they're very much these almost live like 3D cartoon bobble things, bubbled characters. Those, if you notice, there's always movement in every single frame. What we know about children's minds is that they will attach to movement and activity and light. So the slower the programming, the more naturalistic the lighting, the environment, the more meaningfully they will be able to differentiate what is helping them in terms of the screen and them. Because if they don't even know the difference between who you are as a parent and your body and theirs, they definitely don't know the difference between real life and what's in the screen. And imagine you've been feeding all of that to your kid like at high doses. I remember going to my doctor, and she asked about screen time in one of our early visits in, I think, the first 2 years or first year. And I said, well, you know, he gets like an hour on weekends. And she was like, oh my God, okay, this is great, top tier. And she was like, I thought you were gonna say like 1 hour a day, which is great, that's fine. And I was like, okay, so I'm doing okay. And at the time, I thought that I was a bad parent for letting him have any screen time at all. But he will ask now. And he asked me last night. And you know what the answer was? What day is it today? Today was Thursday. Today's Friday. It was Thursday. And I'm like, do we watch TV on Thursdays? But I want it. I'm like, and that's gonna suck to suck. You can look at it tomorrow. And so like I have gotten much better at not responding to his increasingly more expert levels of manipulation, and not in like a pejorative sense, but just influencing me. Like he's starting to know me, and he knows like, oh, if I ask mommy this when she's busy, or if I ask daddy and then I ask mommy, then I'll get the answer. So, you know, they get their needs met. And that's what children do. So they will constantly pick at you to get their needs met. They will ask, they will pressure you, they will do the wrong things, they will do the thing you told them not to do just because they want to see how you react. And those kinds of provocations, you just need a firm, what's the messaging? So we find the message, and the message is on the weekends only. And that's the running statement. Our husband and I call it like the movie billings of the week, is that there's no showings happening. There's no showings.
Boundaries helps.
Yeah. There's no showings this week. You can watch something on the weekend, and then we get intentional about what we're doing in terms of a family. So that also helps, right? Not just the slower programming. I think Miss Rachel's one. My kid watches a lot of Sesame Street.
Paw Patrol?
No.
It's my nephew. Like I have no
Definitely. I have like personal issues with Paw Patrol, but that's like a hot take. I think it's law enforcement propaganda, in my opinion. Like, why would we need kids to be dealing with first responder energy as kids? Like, that is the most traumatizing job of anyone. And I know this because I worked with first responders and I worked with law enforcement in, mental health settings. They are not well. And I just don't see the need of like seeding our children with like law enforcement. Like they shouldn't even know at that age, they don't really have the capacity to comprehend who is a bad guy and who is a good guy. They shouldn't actually even be in some ways consuming content about bad versus good, because in their world that doesn't make any sense. So why would we engage in those kinds of narratives? So I'm really mindful not just of like what the content is like visually, but I'm mindful of what is the message that's being told here? Like, what is my child hearing? And even the best shows, like even the ones that we love, like sometimes has a little bit of like, oh, that's weird. I don't love that. I don't know if I want my child to absorb that. And so I think it's just a matter of, if you are going to give your child something to watch it yourself.
Right. We spoke about screen time for kids. Let's talk about screen time for parents.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, the minute we want to take a break, the next minute we start scrolling.
Mm-hmm.
It could be while breastfeeding the baby because the mother is like so bored. She can't keep staring at the wall 24/7.
It's so boring.
Yeah.
It's boring. It's mind numbing. What are you supposed to do? No, seriously. It's boring. I believe you. I got a TikTok addiction just from breastfeeding alone. I'll tell you that much. But it's natural. that's natural, but finish your question. But yeah.
Also, when we give the baby to the partner, the next thing that we do is just scroll, scroll, scroll. Or even while having the baby, we just give the toy to the baby so that they can keep themselves entertained. And we scroll in that 2 minutes. What can I scroll? What's happening? What's happening in Instagram Explore? So does this affect the bond between the parent and the child?
Not fundamentally, unless it's a complete dissociation from your roles and your duties. Like if you're scrolling and like your child's like, mommy, and like you're just ignoring them, then maybe that might impact some things. But you got to think about what is the motivation for that type of stimulation. For kids, a lot of it is language, and they want entertainment. They like color. We show newborns black and white images, and these are all things that stimulate the cones and the cells in their eyes and in their learning system. So that's their motivation. They just want to be entertained. They want to be visually stimulated. For us, we do like entertainment. We like visual stimulation, but a lot of the time our intention when we scroll is to connect, to catch up, to see what's going on, to check in on what other people are doing. And when we have those kinds of intentions that are not named or acknowledged, it can be very difficult to pause and take a break and stop. You have to be purposeful in how you engage in your screen time, in the same way you want to be purposeful with how your kids engage in screen time. So having spaces to be like, okay, I'm going to scroll, but I'm going to put a nap timer on because I just want to I want to touch grass for a little bit. Or like I will scroll, but my partner and I have a rule. We have a policy or boundary around we connect first. We go over the schedule for the day and what it is that we need to do. And then we can check in on our phones, right? And that time is known to be like, don't bother me. I'm checking Instagram, or just don't look at me right now because I need to go to the bathroom and I don't want anybody to touch me. I'm touched out. I'm overstimulated. Go away, right? Like it gets easier to take that time and have those boundaries when you're intentional about how you communicate to yourself and others, whether it's for you or your kid.
Right. So taking time for ourselves is important as long as we give quality time for our kids. Right. So also, I came across a post this morning where a celebrity has launched skincare line for kids as young as 3-year-old.
A skincare line?
Yeah, Rini. And it's been there's a lot of controversy around it. Because do we need a skincare for a 3-year-old?
What's like the motivation? Is it like to beautify?
So the way they've projected, the goal is self-care.
For self-care for the toddler.
3-year-old.
Oh, interesting. I have not heard that.
Right. So it just happened. It just came across, it came up in my Explore. And there's been a lot of controversy around because a lot of dermatologists or pediatricians, they've been saying that the only product a kid needs is a sunscreen. So do you think psychologically this will affect the kid's image, self-image, the way that the beauty industry is targeting them?
What do you think?
I feel it's unnecessary when the kids are kids. Sunscreen, yes, it's required. It's a mandate.
Daycare needs it.
So
they ask for it.
Right.
I mean, I do think it impacts the self-image because at the end of the day, socialization is a real thing, right? Like that's how we can differentiate socialization of gender in some ways, right? Like boys are raised in a certain way, sometimes culturally, and girls are raised in a certain way culturally. And there are a lot of like expectations around what that means, even just if we're just thinking about gender versus, anything else. When you think about self-image, you are also we have to remember that like there's meaning attached to what we do in our children's lives, and they're always searching for meaning because they don't have meaning yet. We have to apply meaning. Like they kind of get a lot of inputs and outputs, like, oh, that light's bright. Oh, I have to poop. Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I'm this. And that's very sense focused. It's like, I feel, I need, I do, I act. And this is a sensory motor phase from a child development standpoint. when they they kind of transition to this pre-operational phase, they start to build representations of their world. Oh, I do this at home. I do this at daycare. I have this friend. Mommy has her hair like this. Daddy wears a beard. And, it's those videos where, dads like shave the beards and the kids are like,
they don't recognize. My husband tried that.
Exactly, because they have a representation of who the dad is at that time. And when that is stripped away, they can feel lost because they need those anchors to make sense of themselves because they have none. So I use that as an example to think about when you are putting a child in an environment where you're like, you should be doing this for self-care. You project that somehow a 3-year-old has the need for self-care when in fact a 3-year-old needs to be taken care of. They require caretaking. So adults engage in self-care because they're adults and they don't need to be caretaken, right? Like they care for themselves. But what are you telling a 3-year-old when you say, oh, you have to use the skincare for your self-care? They don't have a self. So what are they caring for? It's your job as a parent to care for them, right? And what kind of belief system around image and beauty and bodily upkeep? I work with eating disorder clients of all cultural backgrounds, and it's a myth that it's a white woman's disease. In many ways, people have disordered and complicated relationships with their bodies, especially after birth, too. And in those environments, I notice there are a lot of like beauty standards and absorbed ideals about what you should be doing that come from our parents, that come from our mothers, that come from our relationships. And as a result, I see a lot of body disgust, a lot of body shame. It could be around things that are normal, like hair, or around, do I have a unibrow? My mom thinks it's beautiful, but, I think it's ugly because I got bullied in school, right? Like there's so many nuances to this that I think we can minimize the amount of like cultural meaning making that puts our 3 and young kids into environments before they get to decide for themselves what their body is, or recognize that maybe they have a body and they get to decide how to care for it. And I'm not saying that self-care isn't an important tool to teach, but is it self-care by way of skincare, or is it self-care by way of we brush our teeth every night, we wash our hands, we like
hygiene,
right? Like self-care for a 3-year-old is like
face
hygiene.
Mask.
Regular baths, it's not like you need to look pretty and your skin needs to be like glassy and glass skin. Like a 4-year-old should not be talking about glass skin. They should be figuring out how to get spaghetti sauce off their face, and being like, wow, like I could put my clothes in the laundry basket, and then I have an awareness that the clothes get cleaned. Maybe I will participate in that activity with my mom and see how she upkeeps that. And that's a more productive, I think, self-care strategy. Is like, have your kids come around, like, all right, help me out, put the clothes in the laundry. My son loves that task. He's like, yeah, and then he's like this. I'm like, yeah, exactly like this. That's my screen time.
Right.
I just give him tasks. I'm like, you want to be helpful? Help me out.
My husband is waiting for that phase when she grows up, where to just ask her to get the remote, can get the juice for me. So yeah, that pretty much brings us to the end of this episode. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Of course.
And I'll be sharing all your details in the show notes. And whichever phase that you're in, could be postpartum, handling toddler tantrums, do understand that you're not alone. And it's pretty much a journey and you'll get through it. So until next time, take care. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you.